Many people think the Federal Reserve or FED did well in controlling inflation because it went down from 9% to 3%. Some believe that a small increase in interest rates will fix the problem, but the truth is, we're not as close to our goal as it may seem. The big drop in inflation from 9% to 3% happened mainly because the prices of things like oil and other stuff went down a lot. This drop was mostly because the US dollar was strong. People who made money thought interest rates would go up, so this happened. The Federal Reserve recently raised interest rates. This has led to higher oil and commodity prices and the US dollar in getting weaker. So, the overall inflation rate measured by the Consumer Price Index or CPI is starting to go up. However, if we look at the core CPI, which the Federal Reserve pays more attention to, it's still around 5%. This means that despite raising interest rates, core inflation hasn't decreased much. The Fed plans to raise rates more, but there's not a lot of room to do so. You might wonder why raising interest rates is supposed to be good when prices aren't going down much. Think of it like this. When rates go up, it's like the cost of borrowing money increases. This affects things like mortgages or loans for businesses. When borrowing gets more expensive, it's like the price of something you buy regularly going up. It costs you more. Higher borrowing costs also impact businesses. When businesses face higher expenses like employee wages or materials, they often raise their prices to make up for it. So you end up paying more for things you buy. As interest rates keep going up, they affect various aspects of how businesses work, leading to higher prices. Considering all of these factors, it's not clear if the Federal Reserve has achieved its goals with these rate increases. The purpose of raising interest rates is to reduce overall spending in the economy by making borrowing more expensive. The idea is that when borrowing costs more, people and businesses borrow and spend less, which slows down the economy. That's the idea behind it. The situation doesn't match what we expect. People are borrowing a lot, even with higher interest rates. The government is also spending a lot more money than it's getting. Normally, during tough economic times, the government spends even more, but right now, they are already spending a ton. Despite the Federal Reserve trying to make borrowing more expensive, people are still borrowing and spending. This keeps the demand for things like goods and services high, which makes prices go up. So, the Fed hasn't really controlled inflation like they want to do. To make things more confusing, they are changing how they calculate inflation. They might keep changing it. That's why this whole situation seems a bit strange. When they say they want a 2% inflation rate, it's more like a 4% increase in prices using the old way of measuring. So all those years they said we needed more inflation, we were never really below that supposed 2% target. Surprisingly, we have been experiencing higher inflation all along, even when they said we needed more. The reason for this confusion is that they measured it in a way that wasn't quite right. They did this because they wanted a reason to print a lot of money. This money printing was meant to boost the economy, fund government spending, and let politicians avoid making tough choices that could have affected their chances of getting re-elected. If the Federal Reserve didn't print all this money and keep interest rates low, politicians might have had to spend less, which could have cost them votes. So instead of making hard decisions, we created inflation. Now, we're dealing with the results of this approach, and the issues with inflation are big, and they don't have an easy fix. They might even get worse as time goes on. Powell had to say that the Federal Reserve is really committed to getting inflation back to 2%, no matter what. He made it clear they are determined to do this, but he also admitted that we have a long way to go, which backs up what I'm saying. If we're still far from that 2% goal, and the Federal Reserve has already raised interest rates to 5.5%, it makes you wonder, how will we ever get there when it seems so far away? What struck me as insincere in his speech was his emphasis on the inflation problem and its significant threat, without mentioning the massive fiscal stimulus being pursued by the White House and Congress. It's like trying to put out a fire while Congress is adding fuel to it with their spending policies. You know, the progress we're making here is quite limited. What Powell should be doing is taking a page out of Paul Volcker's playbook. When Volcker was in a similar situation, he was facing the challenge of battling inflation during a time when governments were running deficits. These deficits, while not as big as what we see today, were considered substantial back then. Paul Volcker criticized these deficits strongly. He told Congress that if they wanted to fight inflation, they had to control government government spending and aim for a balanced budget. However, it's puzzling that Powell seems to be letting President Biden and Congress off the hook. It's like he's not even acknowledging these deficits exist. It's a bit like having two different teams playing different games. The Federal Reserve is trying to slow down the economy by raising interest rates. They think this will make people borrow and spend less, reducing overall demand. But the government is doing the opposite by increasing demand through big budget deficits. It's like they are saying, let's make people spend more. There's a problem when you realize that the two strategies are working against each other. It's like having one team trying to score goals and another trying to stop them. They are not cooperating. They're going in different directions. So you might wonder, how can we make any progress with these conflicting approaches? It is a good question. If the government keeps spending a lot, and it seems like they will, the Federal Reserve might face a tough choice. They will have to decide whether to let long-term interest rates go up a lot more than they have already, or find some other way to balance these conflicting policies. Right now, interest rates are already quite high, the highest in 18 years, or maybe even 16 years. Yields on government bonds that last 10 to 30 years are around 4.2% more or less. But if the government keeps running big deficits and the Federal Reserve keeps doing what it's doing, these yields could go up to 6% or even 8%. That's a big jump from where they are now. Such a raise in interest rates would affect the financial sector, real estate, and basically the whole economy. The very low rates we had in the past decade are unlikely to come back. So perhaps an additional quarter point or maybe a half point increase in interest rates will give the impression that we're nearing our destination. However, the reality is that we're still quite far from reaching our goals. It's like we're on a journey, and even though it may seem like we're almost there, in reality, we still have miles to go. As we finish talking about today's global economy, it's clear that things are changing in ways we haven't seen before. Inflation is coming back and interest rates are moving around a lot. But even with these challenges, new ideas and our ability to bounce back are guiding us forward. Just remember, the story of the economy keeps changing, and it's important to stay informed. If you found this video helpful, please like it, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell so you'll know when we talk about the next part of our economic journey. Your support keeps us going, and we are glad to have you with us. Thanks for watching.